Good evening. My name is Cecilia Wood. I am testifying on behalf of myself, and I am testifying in behalf of this bill. And the reason I'm testifying in behalf of this bill because I think we have reached exactly the predicament that Chief Justice Roberts described in his dissent in Obergefell. What we have is we have a long-standing, recognized, protected class, which is religion, and then we have a newly discovered right, which is this right to marry. And those two rights have hit this point in our society where they are in conflict. So we have a couple of options. We can either say we're just going to duke it out and one group's going to win and one group's going to lose, or we can say we're going to make this accommodation like we do for people who need to leave jobs and go to a quiet place and pray at certain times, or who need to observe certain holidays. We do that for other public employees. We do that for people who are in prison and have violated our laws, and yet we show them that respect. And so I think this law reaches that kind of a compromise that we're going to have, or we're going to end up in another civil war. And so for that reason, maybe not a bloody civil war, but equally ugly. And so for that reason, the alternative is that all the Christians stay home, or all the Jewish people stay home, or anyone who has a strong religious belief that they can't that they can't participate in this particular thing because of their religion. And there may be this county in Texas, I don't know this county, but I know that in Tennessee, and I just know it's not Coffee County, but in Tennessee there was a county where all the district clerks went home, and then there was nobody to do anything. So I'd ask you to pass this bill.
Let me ask you a question.
All right.
Is sincerely held religious belief subjective or objective?
It is going to be probably subjective, just like a matter of conscience.
So 30 million people in Texas, we would have 30 million sincerely held religious beliefs.
Or conscientious objections, because the Texas Constitution protects
and I
it.
was about to ask you that. What is a conscientious objection?
Someone who, during the draft, wouldn't participate but would do something
Well, that
else.
explains the draft. I'm talking about in terms of the bill.
Well, someone, for some reason, I don't know, because I will admit that my thoughts on the bill are based on my religion, but there are people that for some reason might think it's wrong, but not based on a particular verse of scripture or quote from the Quran or some other piece of religious writing, and our Texas Constitution protects that as well.
At what point should the public know that?
What do you mean? Like if they
to know your religious held, your sincerely held religious beliefs. At what point should the public know what they are?
I don't know that the public needs to know what they are unless.
Well, if they're going to show up to get a marriage license, is that the time they should know it? Or should they know it before, when you are authorized to do marriages?
I see what you're saying. So that you would post on your, for example, website
somewhere
that, well, and that, I don't think this bill would prohibit that from happening.
No, I'm asking you, should that happen? Should that be the case?
That might help again in the compromise, so that people would know. I need to go someplace else. I need to go to another city. We need to have, in many clerks' offices, they have someone who's designated to issue marriage licenses, and that happened before because of just volume or delegation of duties. So I mean, I'm not opposed to making that known to the public.
Yeah, I think Representative Tyler, we go ahead.
I think Representative Shine hit his button.
First. Representative Shine first.
Find your testimony rather interesting. It's somewhat of a breath of fresh air because of your objectivity in presenting your testimony. And I keep listening to testimony here. There, I've read this bill at least 4 or 5 times.
Oh, yes.
I see nothing in here that says it's specifically about elected officials, yet we keep talking about elected officials. It's talking about recusal to perform a ceremony. And yes, elected officials might be included in that. Maybe that's an area that needs to be maybe amended in such a way, because they do have a constitutional responsibility to the people, and I understand that. But your testimony of where we are in our society at this point in time, I find very interesting, very compelling, because that's kind of where we are. You're right. And rather than a civil war from the standpoint of what you kind of mentioned, it's probably more like a social civil war.
Correct.
Okay, rather than, as a military person, nobody's getting killed, in the other kind of wars. But what we're doing is we're doing character assassinations. Okay? And the gentleman that read the First Amendment, and I've looked at this country, the Constitution, what have you, and I believe where someone brought up Thomas Jefferson, it says, I agree, it says nothing about separation, talking about separation of church and state, the Constitution. But, ma'am, do you believe that there should not be any separation between church and statesmen? Do you have an opinion on that?
I think that no, I don't think there should be a separation. I think that I should be able, if I choose to run for office, I should be able to take my faith into my job, because that defines who I am.
And that's the people that will elect you to that job, is that correct?
Exactly. And so I know that the people that I vote for, because I trust them, because I believe in the things that they believe in, the reason I know what they believe in is because they tell me, because they want me to vote for them. So I don't know that people are, I don't think we have closet, Christians or closet atheists. I think people are running and they're sharing their values.
Yeah, and see, I'm trying to help get this discussion away from about elected officials, because there's nothing in this bill that says anything specifically about elected officials. It's talking about recusal of any, performing marriage ceremony. We've already ascertained that there are a lot of folks out there that conduct a marriage ceremony, okay? And the testimony of another gentleman a moment ago that making pastries for denominational churches that he may not agree with, but he still did it. I mean, that was a choice. That was a choice that he made. And he still has a faith of his own, because he testified to that degree in some respect. So we're not denying anybody anything. We're just saying that you can recuse yourself from performing a ceremony if you have a religious belief or conscientious objection.
Correct.
I think of conscientious objection of the young man that went in the military in the war and became a medic and got the Medal of Honor and would refuse to carry a weapon even to defend his own life. So we can take it to lots of different extremes.
Sure.
But I think it all comes back to some of your testimony about we are having a social civil war, and that needs to get resolved. But you also mentioned, too, that you vote for the individuals based on your beliefs, and if you were to be running for office, people would be voting for you based on your beliefs
I would
and
hope
what
so.
you stand for. Thank you.
Or not voting for me.
And Mr. Tellerico, I think.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony. I do appreciate this back and forth and trying to understand people's viewpoints. 2 comments and a question. One, of course, allusions to civil war are important. Let's also remember there was a right side to that war and a wrong side to that war. Second, you mentioned Christians staying home. There are many Christians on this dais, including me, who don't hold discriminatory beliefs. So this is just some Christians who hold these kind of beliefs. And then my question would be, you mentioned the draft and conscientious objection, which of course we saw particularly during the Vietnam War. And I think it's a good distinction because it applies to this. I know Representative Shine mentioned that government officials aren't mentioned in the bill, but of course it mentions Section 2.202, which is filled with government officials. So although they're not, yes, the words government officials don't appear here, of course, as we write legislation, we know when we reference a section and they're in there, it's the same as mentioning it. Is there a difference between a citizen having a conscientious objection to a war versus, let's say, the 4-star general in the war who has a conscientious objection? Should that 4-star general still be in that position if he objects to the war that he's about to execute?
Well, I think that's and I probably shouldn't have used the draft because I know.
No, I think it's helpful.
Not having been in the military, but having many family members who were in the military, I know that basically when you join the military, you sign away your rights. So you do not have the same constitutional rights during the period of time that you serve to exercise, even though you're fighting for other people's constitutional rights,
Right.
you don't always have the same
Right,
constitutional
because
rights.
if you're,
So because there's a chain of command, and
Right.
you have submitted to that chain of
right,
command.
and you're an official of the United States government, and if you don't want to be in that position, you probably shouldn't be if you don't want to participate in that war, right? Now, a citizen, like we said earlier, can opt out or can have an objection because they're not in that position. I think that's what we're trying to. No one's, of course, denying
I think
the
we should
ability
use-
of a Texan to have these beliefs. Our problem is if you're in a public office, you can't act on those beliefs if it's going to discriminate against people you serve.
I don't think that the distinction is a military personnel and citizen. I think the distinction is military personnel and civilian, because again, you join and you agree to say, I'm going to put these rights aside because if we're all going to go into battle, we've got to be on the same side. And by the way, the people that led the Civil War and the rights and against slavery, they were Christians, but there were Christians on the other side too. And so not every Christian is going to deal with their faith in the same way. And I certainly believe that yours is every bit as sincere as mine. But we should have the right to express it, and we should not be forced to do something that would. What would you do? What would the state do if every evangelical Christian who claimed that they believed the Scripture and that this was not a marriage and they could really honestly not participate in it, not come to your house and say don't do this, but not themselves participate? I used to sing in weddings. I can't sing in your wedding. What if we all stayed home? What if we didn't come and teach in the schools and work in the clerk's offices? I mean, even in Falls County, Texas, we had 2 clerks. I mean, there's only 8,000 people, give or take. So,
Okay, thank you. I think Representative Kalani has the last question.
Yes. So I think this is a really actually a little bit simpler of a concept. When you decide to apply for a job or run for office, then I'm sure that you would look at what that entails, right? And so if there's part of that job or part of being an elected official that you are not going to be comfortable doing because of your religious beliefs or your conscientious decision, then probably the best idea for you and your beliefs is not to take that job and not to run for office. If you can't serve the entire state of Texas, then that's not the best idea for you.
and I understand that that's your opinion. I just disagree with that. I
Well-
don't think that I should have to choose, or that any person of faith or any person with a strong conscientious conviction should have to choose between being employed and supporting their family
No, I'm
and
sorry.
serving their community outside of that one issue.
That's not a decision of whether or not you can be employed or not. It's a decision of whether you're going to be paid by the state, the city, or a county. If there's a part of one of those positions that you can't do, then you can probably find a different opportunity to find employment. And when we get elected here, we have to be sworn in that we're going to uphold the Constitution and the laws of this state and this country. So if this were to become, then that would go against a lot of the other laws that are already there. It's very conflicting.
And yet, the First Amendment was, in fact, the First Amendment. The Constitution would not have been passed unless there was an agreement on the first 10 amendments. And freedom of religion expression, not just to show up at church on Sunday, was the First Amendment.
Well, let me stop this because I think we could go on, but this is one of those issues where I think there's a line in the dirt, then you got people on one side and people on the other side. And I guess, listening to you, you're a lawyer, right?
Yes, sir.
And one of the principles, basic principle we have in our legal system is notice, right?
Correct.
So that it allows whatever want to happen has to happen only after notice is perfected. And I guess I'm wondering still, when should the public be put on notice that you may have a religious held belief that conflicts with a law?
I guess as soon as it's, if I were to take a job and that I was not going to be able to do.
Well, should you,
specific
before you
thing.
get the job, should you have to disclose whether or not you have a religious held belief that wouldn't allow you to do part of the job?
I don't think so, because you can't not hire someone based on religion. See what,
Well,
again, we
no,
come
no,
back to
no.
discriminate
Hold on,
on
hold on,
religion
hold on,
or
hold on.
discriminate.
You keep saying it's based on religion, and that's not what this bill says. It's not said it's based on. It's held your sincerely held religious belief,
Correct.
which doesn't have anything to do, may not have anything to do with religion.
Well, I think every religious belief has to do with religion, either for
No,
or against.
I can make up a religion in my own mind, and have something held about that. It doesn't have to be one of the religions you know about. I could just make up one today.
I see what you're saying, organized religion. You're
Yes.
right. There are many sincerely
Yes.
held religious beliefs that have nothing to do with
With
an
religion
organized
at all.
religion.
With
An organized
religion at all.
A religion is just a belief or a lack of belief in
Right.
God, or
Right.
some God.
And so it would be almost religious and belief would be kind of the same thing. But what I'm getting at is, when should the public be put on notice about this?
That I think if you don't have any judges that perform weddings, then you should put on your website, we don't perform weddings. You know, every judge has always been free to perform weddings or not perform weddings. So if you're concerned about notice, that might be a good compromise and amendment to this bill. That, you know, if you can't, there's no judges here, then, you know, put that on your website. Nobody performs marriages here.
Or the judge ought to be able to declare, or forced to declare, that they do not perform certain marriages because of a sincerely held religious belief.
Yes. I mean, all the judges, I don't know, I shouldn't say all the judges, I don't practice in every county,
But how about employment? Should you have to tell the employer that you have a certain religious belief, sincerely held religious belief, that won't allow you to do part of the job, and could you be not hired because of that?
I personally would tell someone if I had a particular religious belief, but I don't think you should be not hired if there are other ways that the job can, the service can be provided to the community.
Well, doesn't that conflict with the whole principle then that underlies the bill?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right, okay, thanks.